The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to Urban Fantasies, your fortnightly fix of weird tales, urban legends, magic, and folklore. And now here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
It's Thursday night, it's late, and hello to all our listeners in Paranormal Radioland. I'm Charles Christian, and with me is Janie.
Hi everyone, and tonight the show takes a slightly different format to make room for an extended interview Charles recently conducted with best-selling urban fantasy author Ben Aaronovitch at the British Fantasy Society's recent FantasyCon. Ben's books are full of folklore, ghosts and magic, perhaps his most famous being the best-selling The Rivers of London series. Anyway, we've still got time for some of your favourites.
And given the date, with Halloween just gone and bonfire night at the weekend, we're also going to be focusing on some seasonal folklore and magic. But first, this week's haunting.
And it's over to North London and Bruce Castle on Lordship Lane in Tottenham for a recurring manifestation featuring the ghost of Lady Constantia Coleraine. According to legend, late at night, every 3rd November, she can be seen and heard throwing herself from the top of a tower and then crying out a wild, despairing shriek as she plunges to her death. Another cheery tale then, so come on, what's the story on Lady Constantia?
Right, Lady Constantia was married to Henry Hare, the 2nd Baron Coleraine, and the owner of Bruce Castle in the mid-17th century. Henry had previously been engaged to a wealthy heiress called Sarah Alston. However, she went off to marry the Duke of Somerset, so Henry married Constantia on the rebound. But it was not a happy marriage, not least as Henry and Sarah apparently kept up their relationship with each other. It's not entirely clear whether Constantia took to living in the upper rooms of a tower at Bruce Castle to avoid her unfaithful husband, or whether he imprisoned her there so he could continue his affair with Sarah. Whatever the circumstances, on the 3rd of November 1680, Lady Constantia climbed onto the parapet of the tower and jumped to her death, and her despairing cries heard floating away on the autumnal blast, as a local newspaper, the Edmonton and Tottenham Advertiser, put it in a story that appeared in 1858, which is the earliest recorded reference to the ghost.
And then what happened?
Well, the Duke of Somerset had already died childless and at a relatively young age, leaving Sarah Alston a very wealthy widow, so Constantia's death came at a convenient time as it left Henry free to marry her. In fact, Constantia's death may have been a little too convenient, as there were suggestions that Henry had been seized with a violent hatred against her, and according to one version of the story, Constantia was actually being pursued by Henry on the night of her death and fell to her doom in an attempt to escape him.
So did Constantia jump, or was she pushed? Suicide or murder?
We'll never know the answer to that, as there is now very little information to be found about either her short life or the circumstances of her death. We don't even know where she was buried. The suggestion is All Hallows Church in Tottenham. However, the parish register for the period is complete and makes no mention of her death or burial. But there again, in those days suicides were not allowed Christian burials in churchyards, so if she is at All Hallows, then the cause of her death would have been covered up, which would also explain why there is no record of a tomb or an entry in the parish register.
Call me suspicious, but if poor Constantia had been murdered, or at least her husband had chased her to her death, then that would also be a very good reason for a cover-up and an off-the-record burial. Anyway, Bruce Castle is now home to a museum run by the London Borough of Haringey, and it's open to the public Wednesdays to Sundays from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m, admission free. And if Lady Constantia's experiences haven't put you off, you can even book the place as a wedding venue.
Should also be mentioned that although the most striking feature of Bruce House today is the impressive Belvedere clock tower above the front entrance porch, complete with a couple of ornate external balconies, this is not where Constantia fell to her death. The site of her haunting is the much older brick-built Tudor Round Tower to the southwest of the main house.
How can you be so certain?
Because the construction work on the clock tower did not commence until 1682, 2 years after Constantia's death. The cost, incidentally, being met by Henry Hare's wealthy new wife, Sarah Alston, aka the Dowager Duchess of Somerset. Before we leave Bruce Castle, listeners may also be intrigued to hear that Henry's father, that's Hugh Hare, the first Lord Coleraine, was one of the first people in the UK whose cause of death is recorded as choking on a turkey bone. Apparently at supper one evening in 1667 he was eating and drinking and, to quote a contemporary report, talking merrily with some gentlemen of his acquaintance and having a turkey bone in his mouth. It was hard luck through extreme laughter to cause it to go down the wrong way, which was ye instrument of his death.
Are we going to do our On This Weird Day in History section now?
Sort of, but with a focus on the time of the year as we're midway between Halloween and Bonfire Night.
Don't get me started on Halloween. Now, I don't recall there being any Halloween celebrations in my childhood whatsoever. Mind you, I was a softy southerner. But so what was it like for you up north when you were a boy?
Hey, when I were a lad, and apologies for sounding like the Monty Python Four Yorkshiremen sketch, growing up in Scarborough on the Yorkshire coast, the highlight of the run-up to Bonfire Night was the night before, the 4th of November, which we called Mischief Night.
Never ever heard of Mischief Night. So what was that?
Have you heard of its other names, Miggy Night or Punky Night?
No.
Well, it was like Halloween trick-or-treating, but without any treats and the tricks verging on minor acts of vandalism and antisocial behaviour. In fact, every year our local newspaper would carry a list of handy tips for householders. These included placing a bucket of water beneath a letterbox to catch any lighted fireworks being dropped through, and hiding your garden gates in a shed to prevent them being removed and swapped with gates from another house in another street.
Yeah, people were a bit odd in Scarborough though, weren't they? I mean, present company accepted, of course.
It wasn't just Scarborough. Mischief Night was celebrated all across the northern counties. Yorkshire, Lancashire, Cheshire, Derbyshire, and as far south as Nottinghamshire and Lincolnshire. Given the strong Viking heritage of all these counties, they were all part of Danelaw during the 8th to 10th centuries. I'm wondering whether there was a connection with Loki, the Norse trickster god, at work here. Anyway, the 4th of November was also the night we lit our lanterns. We called them punky lanterns.
Sorry.
They were carved out of turnips or swedes rather than pumpkins, and lighting them was accompanied by chanting this little rhyme. Give me a candle, give me a light. If you don't, you'll get a fright. Talking of frights, the local hospital A&E departments were full at this time of year of young boys who'd cut, stabbed or sliced themselves with carving knives and potato peelers, trying to carve out rock-hard turnips.
Well, that's why they invented pumpkins then.
Exactly, elfin safety.
Ah.
Right, I'm just going to start with a public service announcement. This is for the sound recording to say it's October the 1st. We're at the Bull Hotel in Peterborough for the British Fantasy Society's FantasyCon 2017, and I'm talking to Ben Aronovich. Ben, you've got a new book out on the Rivers of London series, and
novella,
and more about that later, but according to Wikipedia, so it must be true, the first book in the series won you a new writer award in 2011, which is slightly odd because you first crossed everybody's radar 20 years ago. Before then,
I didn't win it.
You didn't win it?
No.
Oh, you were nominated for it?
No, it was the Cadbury Award. It was the Galaxy Book Award,
It's something to do with
and
chocolate.
It was the worst organised award ceremony in the history of award ceremonies. And even if they were to offer me a large amount of money, I'm not going back to them because they're horrible.
But going back to your first writing gig...
Well, actually, I would go back if they offered me a large sum of money.
How did you
I
get...
should make that clear. Sorry, I'm interrupting.
Yeah, not at all. We're here to listen to you. You started writing for Doctor Who at the age of 23.
Yes.
How did you get the gig?
Well, right. Well, I wanted to be a scriptwriter.
Yeah.
And someone gave me a good piece of advice. I can't remember who it was now. And they said basically what you do is, in those days, script editors had a lot more power than they do now. They were actually important people as opposed to rubber stamps for producers. And knew their craft. And it was a step, the actual career ladder was script editor, producer, and it meant something. And so you would look at a script editor on television. Remember, this is back when there was no video, so you had to actually watch television and make a note like this. So it went up the screen, and you found people that you liked, and then you wrote a spec script, and then you sent it directly to them. Mm-hmm. And it was always very important to have a name on the script, so it went to someone.
Yeah.
And that the script. See, in those days, it was the first days of computers, so. These people would get a lot of scripts written on crayon. I'm not kidding. You should have seen the Doctor Who slush pile. It was fantastic. But so I went to my local print shop and actually had it printed out properly and bound. Well, I'm sorry about that. It's the Diet Coke. And I sent it in and to a lady called Caroline Alton. And she picked it up and she liked it. And she said she had me in for an interview at Threshold House, which was where actually all the drama was actually put together. And I said, what do you like? And I said, well, I like science fiction and crime. You see, anyone who's read my stuff will find that amazingly unsurprising. And she said, well, write something for Doctor Who and write something for Rockcliffe Babies, which was, the only science fiction on, and at that time, possibly the only crime series on. Mm-hmm. So I did that, and had Rockcliffe Babies gone for another series, I would have written one for them as well. But as it is, Doctor Who did go on, and Andrew Cartmel liked my spec script. And one day he phoned me up and said, "We'd like you to write the Dalek story." Mm-hmm. This was after lots of discussions and me handing in ideas and talking to John and things like that. So,
yeah, how much control did they have over you in your writing? Because I mean, the remembrance of the Daleks. It's got the cliffhanger at the end of the first episode where the Dalek suddenly levitates.
Oh, well, that was the only thing we knew was definitely going to happen.
Oh, right. Because, I mean, you single-handedly destroyed 20 years of schoolboy jokes about, you can run away from Daleks by climbing stairs.
What happened was, John Nathan Turner had all the surviving episodes as VHSs in his office. And that was back when you couldn't get them as VHSs. You just couldn't get Doctor Who as VHSs. So basically I just went, okay, in the interest of research, I will now take these all home. And I took them all home, and I essentially watched, it wasn't a complete 24 years of Doctor Who because there were quite a lot of missing episodes in the middle. Oh my God, those Hartnell episodes dragged. Wow, thank God you can fast forward. I mean, they were of their time, but they were... There's a completely different style. You go back to that stuff, and there's people running on the spot in tiny little, obviously tiny little studios, while very bad super exposure goes on around them to imply that they're running through a jungle. And you can get away with that then. You can get away with it now, and you really couldn't get away with it now.
Yeah.
So I watched all that, and one thing I really noticed was that there's the whole Dalek going upstairs things. So when they asked me to do the Dalek story. There is a bit where Tom Baker says, if you're Masters of the Universe, you follow me up this rope ladder. And I thought, all right, we're going to have to deal with that one. And so Remembrance of the Lights basically went like this, right? We want to do it in 1963 because it's the anniversary. It's not the anniversary story, but it's the anniversary season, right? So we'll go back to 1963. We want to have Daleks fighting each other because at that time the BBC were getting very shirty about the number of people being killed. So we thought, well, that way we can have lots of bangs and whistles, but it won't be people, it will be Daleks blowing up other Daleks, and so we can have exciting Dalek blowing up scenes. I'm going to have a Dalek go upstairs and I'm going to blow up Skaro. Mm-hmm. That was basically all that I knew. A funeral, no, actually I knew there was going to be a funeral. So funeral, Skaro, stairs, Dalek factions, and that was it. And then they sent me away and I went off and wrote it. Mm-hmm. And I was young and stupid, so I had no idea what I was doing. So I wrote it in that kind of blissful state of ignorance that you do for your first professional script, where you are a genius, I am a genius, and I will write this and it will be the best script ever. And strangely, it was quite good. I mean, I look at it now and go, oh, God, no.
It's still very highly rated by fans.
It's very highly rated by, I think, fans of Kind, to be totally honest. I mean, it's good. It's got its moments. I particularly like Ace yelling wimps out the window. Cheating Daleks is one of my favourite bits. And it's got its bits where I sit there and I just think you could have structured that so much better. But, I'm proud of it, And John left all the control up to Andrew, really, except to say, you can't afford that. There was one point where they said, we can have a Daleks weapon platform, or you can have the windows blowing in on the school. Pick one. And I went, and I thought, they're more likely to do the windows blowing in better than they're going to do a Daleks weapons platform. So that's how the Special Weapons Dalek was born, for those of you that find that sort of thing exciting, was because I wanted because I'd just been to see, was it Master of the Universe?
Oh.
Was it? Castle Grayskull, the live-action version with Dolph Lundgren.
Yes.
And what's his name turns up on a wonderful floating Grace. There's
yes,
this wonderful weapons
he appears behind the
they come into our world, and like the portal opens, this wonderful thing of that floating weapons platform comes floating out, and I wanted something like that, which they would have done very badly. So it's probably just as well we got the special, who was wonderful, looked like a World War I tank, and was great, and suited the special effects team who were assigned to us, because they liked blowing things up, and they just went to town, and that was good.
I want to talk about your other Doctor Who series a little bit later on, but after you'd written Doctor Who, and obviously Doctor Who was cancelled in 1989, that series, you then went on to, again looking up, a huge range of different activities, including writing for Casualty, regular writer for the sci-fi series Jupiter Moons, and then various spin-off novels.
Well, if you look at my work very carefully, you'll see a pattern. What happens is I write Casualty, I write Jupiter Moon. That's the most productive, and making 1990 the most sort of productive period of my life. And
been all downhill since then.
And then it was downhill pretty much continuously all through the 90s to about 2009, when I thought, fuck this for Game of Soldiers, and wrote books instead.
Right.
So all that stuff is me desperately flailing around the bake stuff. It's all me desperately flailing around trying to kickstart my career, which was deader than a dead thing that had got very dead.
Why do you think
and then
that?
Shot.
I mean, was it because you were?
Well, I don't think that. I know that.
Associated with Doctor Who.
No, I don't know. No, you
rubbish.
never find out why that happens.
Yeah.
You never find out why that happens. No one ever comes up to you and says, "I'm sorry, your career as a scriptwriter is over. Please pick it." There's you don't go out with a box. No one gives you a box with your stuff in to go out there. You do just as many meetings. It's just you get to a point where you go, "I haven't been paid in 5 years." Maybe there's a reason for that. You do lots of development meetings. You go and talk to people.
Yeah.
You get gibboned a lot, you propose things, you get assigned to things, you write spec scripts, and you just realise you're not being paid and you've gone bankrupt. I've gone bankrupt! I'm forced to work in Waterstones.
Were you?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, at gunpoint, actually. Literally, someone from Waterstones came around with a gun and said, "You will." No, I basically implied. You can see why I'm a writer, can't you? There's no real situation that I won't embellish if I think I can get away with it. I basically thought, right, I've got no qualifications. I didn't have a degree. I don't have any A levels, and my O levels weren't really that impressive. So I thought, and my experience, of course, was not working for television. So, which is, right, please list your experience, not working for television. So I basically thought, I'm going to end up in retail, aren't I? And I thought, what's the least worst kind of retail? And I thought, well, bookshops is going to be the least worst kind of retail. I mean, like, if you're going to do that compared to stacking shelves in Tesco's, bookselling is, like, much better. So I applied to every single Waterstones along the length of the 24 bus route, basically, because that was like the most convenient bus route for me. And Waterstones Covent Garden, mainly I think because I applied to it twice because it had 3 entrances.
Yes, wrote to different addresses.
There was Garrick Street and there was New Row, and I think I actually went in and because I didn't know the geography very well at that time, and applied to both ends. So, and also had the reputation of being the most eccentric branch of Waterstones in the country.
Right.
See, Waterstones branches have various, reputations. For example, Hampstead is famous for having the worst customers.
Yep.
Because they're all writers and they're all stropping. They want to know why their books aren't face out, which I completely understand. But that's the trouble also with being a writer and growing up in my neck of the woods, is that you go out to your local bookshop and you go, "Hi, you promote me. I'm a local author," and they point at Salman Rushdie, and all the other ones, Sebastian Fuchs. You think, can't they go and live in the countryside somewhere?
Yes. What got you into writing the Rivers of London series?
Desperation. I was going bankrupt. You cannot live on a retail wage and live in central London with a kid.
Yeah.
You go bankrupt fairly quickly. There's just too much of a gap between unless you have a council house, and I didn't have a council house, so I was going steadily bankrupt, and it was the second year I was in Waterstones, and I was shelving people that I hadn't shelved before, and I realised that all these new people I was shelving had actually been published that year for the first time. They were all debut authors, and I thought, hurrah, it must be really easy to get a book published if all these people can do it. That touch of arrogance I had right at the beginning is still with me, to be honest. Or at least much easier than television. And you see, the thing is, I only have one talent. Right, and that is writing. That is my one talent. So that either pays its way, or I'm going bankrupt. So I decided to write a book, and I sort of pulled up projects and TV ideas and book projects ideas, including one which was called The Nerd, which would have been a nerd detective. Which I like. I still one day will write because he's hilarious. Except the technology just keeps changing so fast and there's too many people that know it much better than me that I decided, no, I'm not going to do that because not until I can hire someone as a consultant to do the hacking, because it would have been just, look at the hacking in there, it's so funny. So I thought, right, I'll do this one, which was a police fantasy, and it was called Magic Cops in my head for the longest time. And I thought, right, I'll do that. And then I did it, and then I sold it. And when Peter Grant turned up, and I wrote the first 6 pages, and I realised that I had something hot. Mm-hmm. And I went, right, this will sell. So then I knew it was just a question of finishing it. So I did the whole thing where you get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and slog out 2 hours of work, powered entirely by desperation and coffee. But I knew it was. I knew it would go past the gatekeepers. I mean, I didn't know it was going to sell, but I knew it would get past the gatekeepers. So I knew I would get an agent with it, and I knew I could. Once I had an agent could sell it because it was just the right stuff. Mm-hmm. And then it gets sold, and they did like a ridiculously short run, like 1,500. So it was not a big run of hardback. I was amazed they did a hardback at all, to be totally honest. And we all sat down to like a career as a middle-list author. That was what I was going to be. I was going to help pay my mortgage. I wasn't going to give up my day job because that's silly, which is something I've done 6 times, give up the day job. So, but on the 7th time, I was sure I wasn't going to give up the day job because, after making that mistake 6 times, probably not a good idea to do it again.
You're running out of Waterstones.
Yeah, and also I figured I wasn't going to get another go at anyone. No one else was going to employ me. So... and then the book was just hit. So I don't know. I think it just was. You never know why people buy books. right? You never know if your book is going to be successful. You know if it's good, but you don't know if it's going to sell. Like to an audience, because the audience makes up its mind what it likes. You can hype something, you can create a temporary blip, and you can create interest. And literary fiction basically subsists on creating a kind of artificial market. But if you're writing proper commercial fiction, or proper fiction that people are actually going to read and not just put on their tables so that people think they're brainy, then you have to actually sell to people. You have to write something that people want to read. And so therefore no one was more surprised than all of us. Like, everyone was like gobsmacked. They had to do an emergency reprint, and it was like, oh, it's selling really well. And it was like, oh my god, people actually like this book. And Gollancz started taking me to nicer restaurants and things like that, and it's been getting better and better ever since, really. I live in fear that it will stop at some point.
Did you, when you started writing the first one, did you have in mind a series?
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I'm an experienced writer. You know, I'd already done 20 years of writing by that point, and I knew what they were looking for. They like series. They like series. You are more likely to sell a book if you go and say it's the first one, and here are the outlines. I had outlines for the next 2 books.
Right.
They actually turned out not to be the outlines for the next 2 books, but I had outlines to convince them that they were going to be the next 2 books, and they like that because they've got to make money too, and they like a series. They like a good series. You know, you have to hand in something very special to sell a standalone, and so a series is always good. The potential for a series, it doesn't actually have to be a series, or it doesn't even have to be like a continuous series, like a Game of Thrones kind of series. It just has to be that there's a potential for you to carry on the franchise, if you see what I mean. So you can do something like Lewis McMaster Bujold does in The Curse of Chalian, which is actually do a book in the same world but from a different character's point of view, and things like that. But you must open that possibility. They feel much more comfortable and are much more likely to buy your work.
Now, your latest book, which you said is a novella, The Furthest Station, that is actually between the
Foxglove Summer and the Hanging Tree. Unless it's between the Hanging Tree and no, it's definitely Fox. I have a spreadsheet.
Yes. It's between 5 and 6, I think, isn't it?
Yeah. Is it? Someone's got a website somewhere. I've got it on my website as well. I don't see why I'm expected to remember these things.
Well, I was going to ask you why that, and I was also going to ask you about, because you've also got the graphic novel collaborations with David
also
Carpenter.
Interstitial is a good word, isn't it? I got that from
Interstitial,
Doctor Who.
right.
Interstitial, by the way.
But how do they all fit into it? Because
well,
are you aiming at a different audience with that?
No, I'm aiming. I don't aim at an audience.
Right.
My lesson I learned from my initial success was don't fucking bother aiming for an audience. You have no idea who's going to buy your books. So from now on, I just write them and I sell them.
Right.
I don't aim at an audience. That's not my job. In fact, it's not really the author's job. It's the publisher's job to aim at an audience.
Yeah.
Right, to think about those sorts of things. As an author, you write the book that you want to write, and then you hope that somebody else will buy it. Right? And all really publishers ask from you is that they want to like your book too. Mm-hmm. If you're dealing with publishers, and agents, they read ridiculous numbers of manuscripts. And they really want to pick up a book and go for like the first 3 pages and go, oh my God, I'm enjoying this. I'm sitting on because they're reading them on a Kindle on the train back to some godforsaken suburb, going, I don't want to read this like yet another, present tense YA story about a girl overcoming her odds to become a monster hunter or something. And that's quite good. And then they pick up something that like something goes comes off the page in the first couple of pages, then they're very happy to see it, and then they will worry about who will buy it. Mm-hmm. They will make that decision at the time on what the cover will be, and they will make all the wrong decisions because no one knows anything. It's like filmmaking; no one really knows anything, and then they will go out, and then the audience will decide whether they like it or not. Mm-hmm. It's especially true. That's why I'd never write YAs, because they are the pickiest bloody audience in the entire world. They absolutely will not. But you can hype to the gills anything you like, but they will not buy it. They will not buy it if they don't like it. And if they like it, they will ignore everything else. Harry Potter didn't get big because of hype. Harry Potter got big because of kids passing Harry Potter to other kids in playgrounds and saying, oh, this is really good, you must read it. It wasn't big because parents did that. It was big because kids did that. And a kid's recommendation they've measured this by measuring the speed at which games can go up and down the country, can get from one end of the country in less than a week. Mm-hmm. And when and that is like true word of mouth. The kids market works entirely on word of mouth. So there's no hyping, there's no Guardian reviews. You just go. And I'm quite fatalistic about it. You write the book that you want to write because that will be the best book that you can possibly write. Okay, and then you listen to your editor.
Rather than writing a book you think you
can't write because you can't even anticipate what your editor's going to want, let alone what the audience is going to want. So you write the book you want, and then you listen to your editor if they've got some experience and you agree with them, but you don't listen to them if you don't. Mm-hmm. And they will decide whether that's like to kick you out or not. I mean, you kind of negotiate these things.
Yeah.
But when you start off, you're a minnow. And so therefore you have to listen to what people say. And then if you're really successful, nothing succeeds like success. And then you get to say, I say different. And they have to argue with you. And it's sort of like the boots on the other foot. But everyone basically wants the same thing. They want a book that they like. They want to sell something that they enjoy. Booksellers enjoy selling books that they like. Publishers enjoy publishing books that they like. Editors enjoy editing books that they like. Everyone wants a book that they like because it's a pain to edit something you don't like. It's just as much as it's a pain to read something you don't like. And that's why I've got quite a lot of time for professional critics while ignoring everything they say. But they have to read these books that they don't like and then write interestingly scathing things about it. And I think we all live in the shadow of Clive James, really, in that respect. It was just the best possible guy for that on television. Occasionally, you can get the collection of his collected reviews as the Crystal Bucket, and they are the best reviews of television ever written, ever, and they are funny. And they are funny to me now, even when I can't even remember the programmes he's reviewing in the 70s this was.
Yeah.
And I completely can't remember what the topic of this conversation was.
Well, you were expressing your admiration, although you don't believe anything they say, of critics.
Well, you should know. You see, because you are the arbiter of your own taste. You are the arbiter of your own talent, and ultimately, you're the arbiter of your own work. Mm-hmm. Right? You must learn to edit your work to a certain extent. You must learn. You must stop. You must step through the kind of portal of I'm a genius, and you must look critically at your own work and say, I will change it, not because somebody else will want it different. Not because someone will go, I don't like the present tense past participle. No, you must look at your own work and say, does this work as work for me? Right? And it must be the best thing you can do. It must be the best work of craft that you can do when you hand it on to your editor. Right? It should be the best work of craft you could do. Now, it isn't going to be because the first draft is always a bugger. And you always sit there thinking, I am never going to look at this piece of work again in my entire life. My mind is going, get away from me. And people say, how's it going? I don't know. I throw it across the room. But what you have to do is you have to come back to it if you have time, and you have to look at it again, and you then have to be objective about it. Yeah. But you have to be objective, framed in your terms, not framed in other. You can't frame your objectivity in other people's terms. That makes no sense as a sentence whatsoever. But
yeah.
But you see what I mean. So
yeah,
it's very important to write what you like, what you want to read, and then hope that somebody else likes it. And that's all you can do. That is your only choice. There are people out there who have tried to game the system and they can't game it. You see, Patterson doesn't have his vast army of writers. He's not getting away with it because he cynically markets his stuff, which he does do now. I mean, Patterson will literally go and say, what's written in London? I will get a London writer and then I'll write something set in London with my name on it and written by this guy, and we will then get the London market. He got it because these first sets of books were really good, and we now trust him to deliver, a collection of what we like out of a Patterson book. We will get out of a Patterson book. Mm-hmm. See?
Yeah.
So it's you can be cynical, but you can only be cynical in a kind of honest way.
Yeah. How long did the first book take you to write in terms of reviewing it and rewriting it?
It took about, in total it took about a year. The actual writing was about 4 months. I was full-time work at the time, so 4 or 5 months. Went out to beta readers, I went out to my friends, one of whom made a very important suggestion that later became the scene where the boat goes under the water. Mm-hmm. It came back, I sold it to my agent. My agent then said, okay, I'll flog it to this lot, and then he put it out. I can't remember. There was a certain amount of auction going on, which was quite nice, and then Gollancz bought it. And Joe Fletcher, who then immediately left. I don't know, I have this effect on people, I think. So he started my bye. He's like, no, editor number 2. Now I'm my 3rd editor, It's terrible. Soon it might be, they're just so flimsy these days, editors. You need robust editors of the past. I think what it is they no longer go for lunch and don't come back.
Yes.
See, in the old days, they used to go and get Blotto at lunch, and I think that used to get them through the process of being an editor. I think they could face a morning with working through people's manuscripts in the assumption they would spend the entire afternoon completely pissed out of their brains. But alas, those days are gone, and they all work in open plan offices now, and it's not fair. They can't get quietly drunk even at the office. I'm trying to encourage them. I send them alcohol on a regular basis. What was I talking about? Editors.
Yep. And how long the first book was?
And then it took about another year to sell.
Yeah.
And then another year production, and then it came out. So, but total about 3 years from I shall write a book to I have sold a book.
You're listening to Urban Fantasist with Charles Christian on the Paranormal UK Radio Network.
One of the things that intrigues me about them, you're set it in police procedural territory, and you have it very much up to date. So you've got Peter Grant sometimes having to do health and safety risk assessments,
very important,
dealing with
HSE
ghosts
risk
and stuff. But it's a wonderful reflection of modern life. But you've got an interesting ethnic makeup of some of your characters. Peter Grant describes himself as being between IC3 and IC6.
No, he describes himself as would be registered by an outside observer as between IC3 and IC7, depending on whether he's got a suntan or not.
Yes. But you've also got Sarah Gully.
IC7, by the way, is that orange tan that people get when they use too much tanning salute, in case you're wondering.
TV celebrity colour.
TV celebrity colour is IC7.
Right. But you've also got Sarah Gulleed, and you've got Sarah and Abdul Haq Waleed.
Yes.
Which is sort of intriguing, because the time you were writing this, it was not long after the Metropolitan Police was being described as being suffering from institutional racism.
Actually, it was 11 years after that.
It was 11 years.
Yeah, McPherson was 98, 99.
But it's still relatively recent, and it,
the one thing, publishing can't cast aspersions on anybody for its ethnic inclusivity, so neither can actually any of the professions. So
no, it just seems intriguing that the Met that's got this reputation certainly have been, and you've not only got people of colour in there, but you've also got them dealing with supernatural entities. Is that sort of having a bit of a laugh at the Met's expense?
No, it comes from growing up in London.
Yeah.
It never. You see, there's a big difference between writing a book and television. There's television, they were always taking my black characters out and saying things like, "Oh, this is too much like the United Nations," you see, and especially if they were educated at Trinity and from somewhere leafy and white, and they would say things, "Oh no, it's too much like the United Nations, or there's too many black people." I remember one time, God, it was Alan Yentob. I think it was Alan Yentob. Went on television and said, we would have more black characters if the writers wrote them. And this was like 2 weeks after someone had deliberately eliminated a couple from my script. And, I've never actually wanted to throw television out of a window before, but that came very close. The only thing that stopped me is it wasn't my television. And so I'd had to have bought somebody else a television. And so when I came to write a novel, I basically was just doing what I had always... it's not even I planned it. It's just I grew up in a mixed area, went to a mixed school. I had mixed friends. The first all-white environment I ever worked in was the BBC. That was the first time I ever went into anywhere where you walked in and there were no black people, except in the canteen and guarding the door. And it's still the same. I go into Carmelite House and it's like, yay, hi Bob. And it's land of whiteness. Yay! Land of whiteness. But this is I'm being unfair to the publishing industry. This is true of barristers, this is true of everyone. Mm-hmm. See, the dichotomy of London is it's full of these organisations, right, that are essentially run by people white people who are not from London.
Yeah.
They're all, if you look at them, it is all people who are from outside London who come to London for these careers and run these organisations. If you're a Londoner, your ethnic background, your ethnic kind of mix, especially if you're a central Londoner like me, your ethnic background has been completely different. You've grown up, you went to a completely different kind of school, went to a completely different background in terms of so it's totally normal for me. It would be really weird for me to write something where everyone was white, unless I did that on purpose. I would have to do that on purpose rather than the other way around. Mm-hmm. So when people say, there's lots of diversity, for me, it's not. It's normal. I put normalcy in.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I put normalcy for me, my normalcy in.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, which is interpreted as diversity by other people, which is fine. I don't mind that. But the people go, why did you make Peter black? There was no point where Peter Grant was a white guy. There was no point where Peter Grant... In the same way that Dr. Woolley just turned up for that page. If you get to the page where Dr. Woolley turns up, he didn't exist until that page in my head. And I thought, oh God, I need a guy. And then suddenly this Scottish, gingery Scot, who was a Muslim, appeared with his backstory of coming from the Highlands. He had a Highland accent and his parents were all Calvinists and he'd converted at Edinburgh University while taking his medical degree. And it was like, wow, quick, write him while he's hot. And that was it. That's why he's not in the first... Also, if I was to go back and rewrite the book, Wally would have been in the first scene where Peter does the thing with the body, which is what happens now. When we were going through it for potential script ideas, I was looking through the structure and I went, why the fuck is Wally not in the pathology lab at that point? Why does he go? And it's because I hadn't thought of him until he turned up and then he just arrived. The same with Zaha Gulid. I wanted a description of it. DC had to go down with Peter down the stairs, right? And I thought, so DC going, no, okay, go in a hijab. Somali girl in a hijab, right? And a leather jacket. And then she just went Muslim, and I was stuck with her. Most of the characters that I keep have some great opening line, and then I'm stuck with them, and that was it. Like Muslim Ninja, that was Gulid's. Zach, give me 30 seconds to hide my stash. Beverly's T-shirt, we run Tings don't run we. And I'm to the point where I'm getting very cautious about people opening doors in my book, because it's like they open the door and then I'm stuck with them for the rest of the series. So it's like, I'm not going to give you a name, because if I don't give you a name, I won't be stuck with you. And even then they come back. Is that 5 minutes?
Right.
I told you I could ramble. You didn't believe me. I said, don't worry about filling the time.
Okay, let's just quickly fast forward to the last question before I throw it open to the audience. Your other Doctor Who series, Battlefield, and obviously in the Rivers series, you've got a lot of Celtic, Dark Age, pagan-y legend myth in there. Is that something you've got a fascination for? I'm
very, very non-Celtic. Mainly because it's so fashionable. So I'm very anti kind of Celtic. The Celtic doesn't exist, you know. I mean, from an archaeological point of view, Celtic doesn't exist. I will take my stuff from anywhere. I'm not fussy. I did Arthurian for Battlefield because I thought, yay, they're digging up Arthur, and then you do the research, and it's a lot of Celtic Dark Ages, which you're not allowed to call sub-Roman period stuff. And you do the mythology of Britain. There's a lot of sub-Roman Celtic, well, what's known as Celtic, which is actually Celtic.
Yes.
Mythology in Britain as well. So you know, it's not really that difficult to see where they came from.
No, it's just intriguing that you've got them in.
It's not intriguing. It's because I'm lazy and will reuse material whenever possible. I'd love to describe it as a thematic obsession, but there you go.
Right. Let's. Any questions from the audience? Lady over there.
I've read all 6 of the Rivers of London novels and love them. One of the things I particularly enjoyed was the kind of geographic specificity of them. So Peter Grant never runs down the road, he always runs down a named road and turns right into another named road. I'm London born and bred, and I know Bloomsbury and Covent Garden really well, so I got quite a lot of pleasure from kind of picturing where he was. And the only book that isn't set in London comes with a map. So I was wondering how important place was to you when you kind of picture the novels and what it's like them.
Well, place is very important. I mean, because I'm you know, one of those people that are like, oh, did you go down that street or that street? I hate it in chases or films where they suddenly magically appear 20 miles away, and you go, that's not possible. I mean, I don't know if you watch National Treasure 2 when they're crossing the bridges of London. At no point are they stuck in a traffic jam, which is just bloody unrealistic. But B, you just think, you know, you can't possibly get from Vauxhall Bridge to, you know, and I understand, you know, being a film writer myself, that actually, you know, you're going to cheat when you do that. But I thought I don't need to. And also I tended to go out and walk those streets. I tend to go out and do the chase in my head. Like I went to for the second book, I went to the Trocadero Centre and recreated the chase and where he would go and where thought, well, she'll hide up there and then come down here and he'll come down. Kind of looked out the thing, what would be the worst that can happen? And wow, she goes down there and all that kind of stuff. So I do that, and then there's a lot of Google Earth, which is very handy for reminding yourself where you are. I find it you have to go there at least once to kind of like smell it. But now that the kind of real time has moved ahead of the times, because the latest book is actually the one I'm writing now, is set in 2015. And I don't know if you go to London, right, they're just constantly rebuilding it under your feet. So Google Earth is becoming very useful for working out whether actually a building was there in 2015, because you can look at it and go, oh, well, he ran into that building, and then I don't know if you know, you can go backwards in time on Street View now. You go backwards in time on Street View and you find that building was not there in 2015. And you think, why am I doing this? Because no one's going to notice, right? But once you start decided you're going to be precise about that sort of thing, you have to be precise about that sort of thing. But also, as a policeman, because it's from Peter's point of view, as a policeman, Peter is thinking, I am going down this street, I am turning left down that street, because he's used to having to give directions. He's used to putting onto his airwave and telling people where he is. He's got to be able to tell people where he is. It's just for safety, if nothing else, but also to coordinate a chase or something. He has to be able to tell his superiors where he is or coordinate where he is. So he's used to thinking, and then he has to put it in his notebook and he has to bring it up when he does a statement. He can't just go, I wandered down a valley down northwards, my lord.
Yeah.
You know, he has to be able to say, I went down, you know, Broadchurch Street and there was this Scottish guy.
Another question?
I was just going to ask, have you any one piece of essential advice for any aspiring writers?
I think I covered it. Yeah, write the book you want to write, and you might not sell it. Right? This is the horrible thing. There is no universal right to be published. Right, there is no, and even if you're published, as many publishers will tell you, there is no universal right to be read by anyone apart from your publisher and your mother, right? And in my case, not even my mother, right? And so there is no universal right. So you can only do what you want to do. And for me, I don't know about other people, I never sat down and thought, I am going to write because I want to please other people. I always sat down and write because I thought, I didn't like that book. I want to write one that I like. I want a story that I want to read. I want to do something like this. This is what I want to do. What you can do, though, is get a book called How Not to Write a Novel by Howard Middlemark and I think somebody else, which is the best single condensed wisdom on what to avoid if you want to get published, basically. And it's a very good book because if you've got 4 or 5 writers and ask their advice on how to write a novel, you'll get about 16 answers, right, and a fight. But if you put 5 to 6 published authors in a room and you threatened to leave them there until they came up with how not to write a novel, you would probably get this thing. And it's got all sorts of things like, don't do the day in the life, right? A really common opening mistake is the day in the life, where you follow your character for a normal day in their life before you're going to disrupt it. And you think, this is great, we'll see what they're like in the day in life. But unfortunately, no one is reading beyond the point where your character has gone back to bed the next morning to wake up. Yeah. For the whatever's going to happen. Whatever's going to happen has to happen pretty much in the first 5 pages, if you know, and things like that, and those sorts of things. Or my favourite, which my friend Andrew ignored, which is, oh, Mrs. Pretty Paws, you know me so well, is don't put your cat in your book, right? At least not in that kind of cloyingly sentimental kind of, you can have your cat if it's a vicious bugger and bites people, but don't put your cat in your book if it's like, oh, you love me, you know, it's like you know every word I say. And it's great because it does all of these things, not just that one, but it has all sorts of things, the things that I used to do, and I sit there go, ooh, well, I'll just walk on from that bit there, and it's very good at fun, and it's funny. I mean, it's actually quite a funny read just in of itself. So I suggest to all people that they buy this book, and I've read it. I read it every so often. I mean, I read it about every 3 years just to remind myself, because it's full of stuff that you find yourself falling into, these kind of like newbie mistakes, and it really will make you more publishable without necessarily blunting what your voice is, or the story that you want to tell. It helps you. It kind of helps with the kind of like stupid mistakes that you wouldn't want to make if you wouldn't like it in a book that you read that you don't even know you're making while you're writing, and you read that and you go, that's what I'm doing. And it can. It's like everything else. If you can identify a problem, you can deal with a problem. It's always important to identify, if you have a problem, it's always important to identify that you have a problem, admit that you have a problem, and then you can deal with it. And that's my best piece of advice on that. And also to make T-shapes with your hands.
The T-shape of doom.
The team shape of doom.
Is telling us that we've run out of time. So, Ben, thank you ever so much. That was great.
Thank you very much.
Find us online at www.urbanfantasist.com or email us at urbanfantasist@icloud.com or follow us on Twitter at urban_fantasist.
With Bonfire Night, the 5th of November, just around the corner, for tonight's practical magic, we're going to be looking at a couple of rituals associated with bonfires. According to the Wiccan Rede, or the laws of Wicca, there are 9 sacred woods that should be included in any bonfire, as well as 1 wood you should never use. The lucky 9 are birch, which represents the goddess or female energy, oak for the god or male energy, hazel representing knowledge and wisdom, rowan or mountain ash representing life, hawthorn for purity and fairy magic, willow for death, which is sacred to Hecate, fir, an evergreen, for birth and rebirth, apple representing love and family, and the grapevine for joy and happiness. Here are the lines from the Wiccan Rede, and pay attention to the 10th and final wood mentioned, the one you should never burn. 9 woods into the cauldron go, burn them fast and burn them slow. Birch in the fire goes to represent what the lady knows. Oak in the forest towers with might, in the fire it brings the gods in sight. Rowan is a tree of power, causing life and magic to flower. Willows at the waterside stand, ready to help us to the summer land. Hawthorn is burned to purify and to draw fairy to your eye. Hazel, the tree of wisdom and learning, adds its strength to the bright fire burning. White are the flowers of the apple tree that brings us fruits of fertility. Grapes grow upon the vine, giving us both joy and wine. Fir does mark the evergreen, to represent immortality seen. But elder is the lady's tree, burn it not, or cursed you'll be. Having got your bonfire burning, take advantage of the flames to work this simple magical spell for the removal of bad memories and to celebrate happier times to come. Take a slip of paper and write down the old pessimistic things you'd like to banish from your life. Add a pinch of dried lavender buds to remove negativity and fold the paper up. Then carefully toss the paper into the flames of your bonfire, and as you do, speak this charm. Remember, remember, the 5th of November, a banishing of old hurts will now come to pass. Add a pinch of lavender and all will be fine, making room for new memories and for happier times. Almost time to go, but before we do, here are a couple of local news stories that may intrigue you. According to a BBC News report, the owner of the Sweet Dreams traditional sweet shop in Great Yarmouth, Norfolk, put up a notice in his window recently denying the building was haunted. The owner, a Mr. Nigel Parrott, said he was tired of people taking part in the town's ghost walks, calling into the shop. Rejecting claims of supernatural activity, Mr. Parrott added, "This place might have, at some point in the past, been haunted, but if Jesus is alive and is with me, this shop is no longer haunted." The shop window sign goes on to say, "All demonic paraphernalia has been destroyed." I think a previous owner once used a Ouija board during a séance. Jesus Christ died so we could be free from all spirits and negativity. He is alive today, and his is the only spirit in the place. Hooray! Hooray indeed, however, given all the commercial pressures small independent shopkeepers face today, including to pay unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's, or taxes and business rates as we nowadays call them, I fear Mr. Parrott is missing an opportunity. If ghost hunters are coming to your shop, smile patiently and then sell them your sweets. I'm sure they'd love to buy packets of ghostly gobstoppers, paranormal pear drops, haunted mint humbugs and spooky sherbet lemons. Finally, spare a thought for the owners of the lakeside caravan site next to Llangorse Lake in the Brecon Beacons in Wales, where someone has stolen, or at least snapped off, a sword embedded into a rock, just like the sword young King Arthur pulled from a stone. OK, it's a modern tourist attraction, but it was popular and even made the cover of this year's Brecon Beacons Visitors Guide. The owners have now turned to crowdfunding on social media to raise money for a replacement sword, and at the time of preparing this show, they've already raised £640. Janie and I will be back on Thursday the 16th of November with more ripping yarns and weird tales from the world of ghosts, folklore, urban legends and magic. But in the meantime, good night, thank you, and may your gods and goddesses protect you from ghoulies and ghosties and long-leggedy beasties and things that go bump in the night.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon. Which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to Urban Fantasist with Charles Christian, your fortnightly fix of weird tales, urban legends, magic and folklore. Keep in touch with us online at www.urbanfantasist.com, by email to urbanfantasist@icloud.com, and on Twitter at urban_fantasist. Good night. Join us again in 2 weeks' time for another edition of Urban Fantasist.